Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel, Sola Stories. I'm 63 years old. My daughter invited me to live with her abroad for my retirement, but a flight attendant handed me a napkin, and after reading the 8 words written on it, I broke out in a cold sweat and had to run for my life that very night. Ladies and gentlemen, my friends, I was overjoyed when my daughter called, hoping to bring me overseas to be cared for. However, a sudden turn of events, just a single note, brought me to the brink of a total collapse. Only 2 days after arriving at my daughter's home, I resolutely booked a flight back home immediately. What exactly happened at the airport that day? What was written on that note that shocked me so deeply? And how did I overcome it all? Please, listen to my story. In June, the air in New Orleans always hangs heavy with the rich fragrance of jasmine and the thick humidity that follows an afternoon rain. My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 63, a retired high school English teacher, and I've long grown accustomed to the slow, deliberate rhythm of this city, as accustomed to it as I am to my own breathing. Ever since my husband passed away, this 2-bedroom condo has been both my sanctuary and my quiet, solitary world. My greatest joy came from the flickering, intermittent FaceTime calls across half the globe with my daughter, Annie, and my adorable little grandson, Leo. Every evening at 8 o'clock sharp, my phone screen would light up. Mom, Annie's bright voice would chime in, but lately, I could always sense a thread of exhaustion woven into her cheerfulness. She had lost a lot of weight, and even with light makeup, the dark circles under her eyes couldn't fool me. "Where's Leo?" I'd ask, squinting at the screen, trying to find my grandson's tiny figure. "Grandma, I'm right here." The little guy would come bounding over, his face chubby and round, his big eyes just like Annie's when she was a little girl. He would babble on about his day at preschool, the neighbor's cat, and a new song he had learned. In those moments, it felt as though every wrinkle on my forehead would smooth itself out. It was a Saturday evening. I was on the balcony watering my orchids when the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't just Annie and Leo, but my son-in-law Julian was there too. He was from a prominent family in Boston, with a polished, well-mannered appearance and a refined way of speaking. He was Annie's pride and joy. "Mom," Annie took a deep breath. Her voice was strange, a mix of excitement and something close to tears. We have some good news to tell you." I put down the watering can, my heart fluttering with a bit of nervousness. "What's the big news that's got you all so serious?" Julian smiled, what I had always considered the standard smile of a successful man. He wrapped an arm around Annie's shoulders, pulling her a little closer. "Mom, we just bought a new house. It's much bigger than our current place, and it has a big yard for Leo to run around in." "Really? That's wonderful." I was truly happy for them. The cost of living in the United States was high, and for them to buy such a large house on their own, they must have worked incredibly hard. Annie looked straight into my eyes through the screen, her own eyes shimmering with tears. "Mom, the house is big. We've already prepared a room for you. It's on the first floor, facing the garden, and it gets the morning Sunday, Mom. Please come live with us." Her words were like a warm current, flooding into my lonely heart. Moving to be with them, a real family reunion. I had thought about these things countless times during long, sleepless nights. "You can come here for your retirement, Mom. You won't have to worry about a thing," Julian added, his tone filled with sincerity. "Annie and I are stable in our careers now. You can help us look after Leo at home, and on the weekends, we can all go for drives out in the country. The air here is so fresh, it's great for seniors." Beside them, Leo cheered. "Grandma, come play with me. I'll show you my superhero collection." I fell silent, a lump forming in my throat. Moving to be with them meant leaving this land, leaving the place where my husband was buried, where my neighbors of decades lived, where every street corner was imprinted with my footsteps. But on the other side of that decision was my daughter and my grandson, my own flesh and blood, everything I had left in this world. Looking at Annie's hopeful face, at Leo's innocent smile, how could I possibly refuse? "Mom?" Annie called out softly, her voice brimming with hope. "Don't you want to live with us?" "Silly girl," I chided gently, tears already threatening to spill over. "How could I not want to?" I told her. "Just give your mom some time to handle things here at home." "Of course, Mom. Take your time," Julian said quickly. "I'll handle the plane ticket." All you need to do is pack your bags and take care of yourself." The call ended, but my heart was still pounding. A vision of a new life, a heaven on earth surrounded by my child and grandchild, unfolded before my eyes. I would be able to cook Leo his favorite meals with my own hands, listen to Annie's thoughts every night, and never again have to face these four cold walls alone. Once the decision was made, I moved quickly. I even sold my condo because I had decided to live with my daughter permanently. My old friends were reluctant to see me go. They threw me a farewell dinner at a classic old Creole restaurant in the French Quarter. "Eleanor, you're leaving. Who are we going to play bridge with now?" "My best friend," Carol said, squeezing my hand tightly. "You take care of yourself over there," an old colleague, Mr. Henderson, advised. "You won't know anyone. If you need anything, just give us a call." I smiled, but a bittersweet ache spread through my chest. I was giving up my entire past to run toward a future I believed would be immeasurably bright. The day I left for the airport, the sky over New Orleans was exceptionally clear. I dragged 2 large suitcases, filled not just with clothes, but with my entire life and all of my hopes. As the plane made its slow descent and I heard the flight crew's announcement, my heart beat even faster. The United States. I had finally arrived. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my excitement. I had no idea that what awaited me was not the paradise I had imagined, but a cruel reality that was about to shatter a mother's heart. This fateful journey had only just begun. Stepping out of the jet bridge, I took a deep breath. The air in America wasn't as fresh as Julian had described. It carried the scent of industrial air conditioning, coffee, and haste. Los Angeles International Airport was dizzyingly large. A river of people of all skin colors and languages flowed past me. For a fleeting moment, I felt like a tiny, lost pebble. But that feeling quickly vanished, replaced by a surge of warmth. I was about to see Annie, about to hold Leo in my arms. I pushed the heavy luggage cart, following the crowd toward the arrivals area. My eyes scanned everywhere, searching for those 2 familiar figures. I imagined Annie running over to give me a tight hug, with Leo shyly hiding behind her before shouting "Grandma." I had a small, stuffed alligator toy ready in my purse to give to my grandson. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The crowd at the exit had thinned to just a few scattered people, but there was still no sign of my daughter. A knot of worry began to form in my stomach. Had something happened? Or did they go to the wrong exit? I pulled out my phone, about to call Annie, when the screen lit up with a text message from her. "Mom, the traffic is terrible. Can you find a coffee shop and wait for me? We're probably still about half an hour away. Love you." I let out a sigh of relief. Traffic? Right. I'd heard that traffic in big American cities was brutal. I replied, "It's okay. Mom can wait. You two be careful on the road." Then I pushed the cart to find a place to sit. I found an empty seat near a duty-free shop. After sitting down, I stretched my sore legs, stiff from the long flight, my heart still filled with dreams of a new life. I would need to learn some basic daily English, learn how to use those modern kitchen appliances, learn to drive here. As I was lost in thought, I suddenly felt a sharp jolt on my shoulder. "Oh!" a soft voice exclaimed. I turned in surprise to see a young Asian American woman frantically kneeling to pick up the contents of her dropped purse, a lipstick, a set of keys, a small notebook, all scattered on the floor. "I'm so sorry, Auntie," the woman said, looking up. Her accent was familiar, perhaps Chinese or Taiwanese. She looked young, about Annie's age, but she was frail, and her face was pale. Her eyes were large but sunken, and they held an unmistakable trace of fear. It's all right, I said, quickly bending down to help her. "I'm old, a little bump is nothing." I helped her pick up the lipstick and keys. "Thank you. I'm so embarrassed," the woman whispered, her hands seeming to tremble. The moment our hands touched as I gave her things back, I felt her quickly and deftly slip something small and soft into the pocket of my jacket. The movement was so fast, so hidden, that if it weren't for that unusual contact, I might not have noticed it at all. I looked up at her, surprised. The woman avoided my gaze. She just hastily stuffed the rest of her things back into her bag, and with her head down, she whispered another sorry before practically fleeing the scene. She walked away quickly, without looking back, melting into the crowd and disappearing around a corner. I did see her glance back at me one last time, her eyes filled with a look of pleading and extreme terror, as if she were being chased by a wild beast. The woman's strange behavior left me stunned. What was that about? Why was she so frightened? And what did she put in my pocket? My heart began to beat a little faster. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a crumpled-up napkin. I looked around, but no one seemed to have noticed me. Curiosity and a sense of foreboding grew inside me. I slowly unfolded the napkin. It wasn't blank. Written on its white surface, in a shaky, messy script with a ballpoint pen, were a few lines in English. The handwriting looked like it belonged to someone in a state of extreme panic. "Auntie, please save your daughter. The truth is in your suitcase." For a second, I didn't understand. Was this some kind of prank? Did she have the wrong person? But then, each word felt like a needle piercing my brain. Save your daughter. Was my Annie in danger? Impossible. She had just texted me. She was on her way here. The truth is in your suitcase. My suitcase? It only contained clothes, some New Orleans specialty foods, photo albums, and my life savings. What truth could possibly be in there? My mind was a chaotic mess, 1,000 unanswered questions swirling like a tornado. Who was that woman? Why did she give me this note? How did she know I had a daughter? And how did she know I was traveling with a suitcase? No, there had to be a misunderstanding. I tried to calm myself. Maybe the woman was delusional, or she had mistaken me for someone else. My Annie was living a good life, with a big house and a loving, successful husband. Nothing could be wrong. But the hand holding the note was trembling uncontrollably. Even though the airport wasn't cold, a chill ran through my entire body. The words on the note echoed in my mind. The rushed, fearful handwriting, the look in the woman's eyes as she left. None of it felt like a joke. Just as my thoughts were in a tangle, a familiar, warm voice sounded beside me, breaking the terrible silence that had enveloped me. "Mom, have you been waiting long?" I jumped, whipping my head around. It was Julian. My son-in-law was standing there, still impeccably dressed in a pressed shirt and slacks, handsome and composed. He was smiling, a brilliant, flawless smile, but for some reason, at that moment, it sent a shiver down my spine. Julian," I stammered, quickly crumpling the note in my hand and hiding it like a criminal. Why? Why are you here alone? Where are Annie and Leo?" Julian came over and naturally took the luggage cart from me. "Mom, you must be exhausted after such a long journey. Annie suddenly came down with a bad stomach bug, probably from stress at work lately. I told her to rest at home and dropped Leo off at a neighbor's for a bit. I came to pick you up first. I'm sorry to have kept you waiting." His explanation was smooth and perfectly reasonable, but my ears were ringing. A stomach bug? Just moments ago, Annie had texted me saying it was traffic. Why didn't their stories match up? A small lie. Perhaps Annie didn't want me to worry. But set against the backdrop of that warning note, it became an incredibly dangerous signal. Is she okay? I tried to keep my voice steady, but I knew it was shaking. "She's fine, Mom. Probably just a simple case of indigestion." "She'll be fine after some rest," Julian said, still smiling. He gently patted my arm. "Let's go home, Mom. Annie and Leo are so excited to see you." He started pushing the cart towards the parking garage. I stumbled along behind him, feeling like a sleepwalker. Everything around me seemed to be covered in a fog. Julian's polished, considerate demeanor now felt like an invisible pressure. Did he know about the note? Was he connected to the warning? Or was it all just a terrible coincidence? My hand in my pocket was still clenched tightly around the napkin. It was now damp with my cold sweat, crumpled and soft. It felt like a ticking time bomb, and I had no idea when it would explode. I looked at my son-in-law's broad back, this man I had once trusted with my daughter's happiness. Now, in my eyes, he had become a stranger, a dangerous one, and those 2 suitcases, which I had seen as my passage to a bright future, now felt heavy with some terrible secret. The truth is in your suitcase. What on earth was that truth? Julian's luxury sedan sped down the 6-lane freeway. The scenery outside the window was completely alien skyscrapers, winding English signs, everything clean and modern, yet with a cold, impersonal feel. The strangeness of the world outside only highlighted the storm raging within me. I sat stiffly in the passenger seat, my hands clutching my purse. In my jacket pocket, the napkin felt like a burning coal against my skin. Beside me, Julian was still cheerful, expertly handling the steering wheel. He started talking, his voice echoing in the quiet car. "You see, Mom, the infrastructure here is amazing. My company just signed a huge contract with a partner in Silicon Valley. The potential in this tech sector is limitless." He glanced at me in the rearview mirror, seeking my approval. "We were able to buy the new house thanks to a successful investment I made." Annie is always such a worrywart, but I told her, my instincts are never wrong. I just managed a non-committal hum. My mind couldn't focus on his boasting. Instincts, big contracts. What did any of that have to do with the plea to save your daughter? As if sensing my silence, Julian suddenly changed the subject. His voice grew a little lower, tinged with a false sympathy. "But has Annie seemed a little down lately? Her old company had to downsize, so Annie's been out of work for almost 2 months. Being at home all day, she tends to overthink things, and her mental state hasn't been great. She often gets upset for no reason, and sometimes she says very negative things. I've tried to get her to see a therapist, but she refuses." He sighed dramatically. "It's a good thing you're here now. With you around to keep her company, she should cheer up. Maybe you can talk some sense into her." The car turned into a quiet residential neighborhood filled with beautiful houses and perfectly manicured lawns. "We're home, Mom," Julian announced cheerfully, pressing the button for the automatic garage door. The house was indeed large, 2 stories with a spacious yard, but I was in no mood to admire it. The front door opened, and Annie and Leo were standing there. "Mom," Annie called out, her smile looking tired and forced. She rushed over to hug me, and I could feel how thin she was, her body trembling slightly. "Grandma!" Leo was much happier. He threw his arms around my legs. I bent down and wrapped him in a hug, inhaling the sweet, milky scent of his hair. Only the warmth of this child could bring any comfort to my heart, which was slowly turning to stone. I stood up and looked directly into Annie's eyes. "What's wrong? Are you not feeling well?" I'm fine," Annie said, quickly avoiding my gaze. "Maybe it's just the change in weather," she then added, subconsciously pulling down the cuff of her sleeve, but I had already seen it. On her pale wrist was a faint, purplish-blue bruise. My world seemed to stop spinning. That bruise, combined with the conflicting lies about traffic and a stomach bug, and the warning on the note, all the scattered pieces of the puzzle instantly snapped together into a horrifying picture I couldn't bear to imagine. "Mom must be tired from the long trip," Julian called from inside, having already brought the suitcases in. "I've already made up your room. Why don't you go upstairs and rest for a while? We'll have a big dinner tonight." "Yes, Mom, you should rest," Annie added quickly, as if she just wanted me out of her sight. I am a little tired," I said, my voice hoarse. "I'll go upstairs first." I couldn't bear it for another second. I needed to be alone. I needed to know the truth. The room prepared for me was lovely, with a large window overlooking the garden, but I didn't notice any of it. The moment the door clicked shut behind me, I rushed to the larger of the 2 suitcases. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the combination lock, my heart pounding like a war drum. My hands and feet were ice cold. I pulled out all the clothes, the gifts I'd brought, the new outfits I'd bought to wear here. I threw everything onto the floor. There was nothing, just clothes. Could that woman have been mistaken? Was I just being paranoid? No. A mother's intuition told me something was terribly wrong. I calmed myself and felt every inch of the suitcase's lining. My fingers brushed against an unusual seam at the bottom, a false bottom. I pried at it with my fingernail, and the panel popped open, revealing a thin, secret compartment underneath. Inside that secret compartment was a thick manila envelope. My hand was shaking so much I could barely hold it. I sank to the floor, my back against the bed, took a deep breath, and emptied the contents of the envelope. The first things to fall out were a stack of photographs. The one on top was a close-up of Annie's face. One cheek was swollen and red, with a trickle of blood at the corner of her mouth, yet she was still trying to smile for the camera. The second photo was of my daughter's bare back, covered in angry purple welts. The third, the fourth, every single photograph was bloody evidence of the torture my daughter had endured. I felt a crushing weight on my chest, as if I'd been struck by a sledgehammer. I couldn't breathe. My daughter, whom I had cherished and protected her whole life, whom I had never so much as laid a hand on, was covered in these wounds. Next were loan documents, a series of contracts from shady financial companies, what people called loan sharks. The debt amounted to hundreds of thousands of dollars, and at the bottom of each was Julian's signature. So, all his boasting about success and profitable investments was a lie. He was a gambler who had lost everything, a man drowning in debt. Then, there was something that left me utterly stunned. A copy of a life insurance policy I had taken out in my hometown years ago. I had bought it on a friend's recommendation, just in case, so Annie would have something to fall back on. I had never mentioned it to my son-in-law, yet here was a copy of it, with the $1 million payout amount circled in red ink. Finally, at the bottom of the envelope was a sheet of paper torn hastily from a notebook. It was a cry for help in Annie's shaky, terrified handwriting. The paper slipped from my fingers. All the sounds, all the light in the world around me extinguished. My world had collapsed. The vision of a heavenly reunion had turned to ash, leaving only a cruel and barbaric conspiracy. My son-in-law, the polished man I had once admired, was a monster. He was not only abusing my daughter, but he was also planning to murder me to collect the insurance money and the life savings I had brought with me. He hadn't invited me here for my retirement. He had invited me here to send me to my grave. And Annie, my poor daughter, had been pushed to the edge, forced to cry for help in this desperate way. I sat motionless on the floor amidst the pile of evidence for I don't know how long. I could hear the sounds of Julian and Leo laughing downstairs. My grandson's laughter was bright and innocent, but hearing it now made me sick to my stomach. Carefully, I put everything back into the envelope and hid it deep inside my handbag. I wiped away my tears and splashed cold water on my face. I had to wait. I had to wait for that demon to leave the house. Time passed with agonizing slowness. Finally, I heard Julian's voice from downstairs. "Mom, you get some rest. I have a meeting with a partner. I'll be back tonight." "Drive safe," I heard Annie reply, her voice weak. The front door slammed shut, and the sound of a car engine faded into the distance. Now, this was my chance. I took a deep breath, opened my door, and went downstairs. Annie was sitting on the sofa, holding Leo in her arms, staring blankly out the window. The little one had fallen asleep. "Annie," I said softly. She jumped, looking at me with panic in her eyes. "Mom, aren't you resting?" I didn't answer. I walked over and sat down beside her, placing the yellow envelope on the coffee table. When Annie saw the envelope, her face turned deathly pale, as if all the blood had been drained from it. "What? What is this?" she stammered, her voice trembling. "How long are you going to hide this from your mother?" My voice was terrifyingly calm. "I saw the bruises on you, and I know you lied about the traffic." I looked her in the eye. "Annie, tell me the truth." "No, nothing's wrong." Annie jumped up and backed away, waving her hands frantically. "Mom, you're mistaken. I just fell by accident. Everything is fine. Nothing's wrong, Mom." She was terrified. Her fear of Julian was so deeply ingrained that she couldn't face reality, even with the evidence right in front of her. Seeing my daughter cowering like a frightened bird before a venomous snake, my heart felt like it was being torn apart. I didn't say anything more. I silently opened the envelope, took out the picture of her swollen face, and placed it on the table. Annie stared at the photograph, and the defensive wall she had tried so hard to build finally crumbled. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the floor, clutching my legs and sobbing uncontrollably. The choked, repressed cries she had held back for so long finally burst forth. "Mom, Mom, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." I bent down and held her thin, trembling shoulders, my own tears streaming down my face. We were so close, yet separated by a chasm of lies and violence. "Tell me," I whispered. "Tell me everything, my child." And so, through choked sobs, Annie told me the whole nightmare. Julian wasn't some investment genius. He was a gambling addict. He had lost all their savings and had even taken out high-interest loans from loan sharks. When he was cornered, his violent, cruel nature was exposed. He started beating Annie every time he lost money or when collectors came after him. He controlled all her communications and threatened that if she dared to say a word to anyone, he would kill her entire family back home. The peak of his cruelty came after he accidentally discovered my life insurance policy. A perfect plan formed in that monster's mind. Lure me to the United States, stage an accident, and collect both the insurance money and all the savings I had brought with me. He used Leo to threaten Annie, forcing her to be his accomplice. "I couldn't do it, Mom," Annie cried. "But he said if I didn't obey, I would never see Leo again. He said he had ways of making a child disappear forever in this country." I was so scared. My only hope was to secretly copy these documents, take pictures of the bruises, and hide them in your suitcase, praying for a miracle that you would find them. I held my child tightly. My daughter had been living in a hell on earth for so long, torn between her fear of her monstrous husband and her love for her mother and son, and it had broken her. She was a victim, and a desperate soul crying for help. "Don't be afraid anymore," I said, stroking her hair, my voice firm. "Mom is here. I won't let anyone hurt you or your son. I absolutely will not." The fire of hatred in my heart had been extinguished, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. There was no time for tears. That monster could be back at any moment. I had to act, and I had to act now. The retirement plan was dead. This was now a survival plan. Annie's sobs finally subsided, leaving only ragged, choked gasps. I helped her onto the sofa and wiped the tear stains from her gaunt cheeks. Leo was still sleeping soundly in her lap, his angelic face completely unaware of the earthquake that had just shaken this small home. Looking at them, the pain in my heart was like 1,000 needles stabbing me at once, but strangely, my mind was exceptionally calm and clear. The initial fear had been replaced by a steely resolve I never knew I possessed. Perhaps a mother's instinct, when pushed to the absolute limit, can turn a gentle English teacher into a warrior. I knew I couldn't confront Julian directly. He was a wounded and hungry beast, and any reckless move would ignite his madness, with Annie and Leo bearing the consequences. Call the police? Here, in a foreign land, with unverified evidence, and with the mentally unstable label Julian had deliberately attached to Annie, I wasn't sure I could win. Besides, the legal process would be long, and during that time, who could guarantee he wouldn't do something desperate? No, the only way out was to escape. "Annie, listen to me," I said, gripping my daughter's cold hands tightly and looking into her eyes, which were still filled with fear. "From this moment on, you must trust me completely. Mom is going to get you and Leo out of here, but you have to act. You have to put on the performance of a lifetime. Can you do that?" Annie looked at me blankly, then, as if understanding, she nodded desperately, a flicker of hope in her eyes. I began to map out a plan in my mind, step by step, as meticulously as I used to plan my lessons. The bait, the reason, the escape route, everything had to be flawless. My enemy was a cunning gambler, but he had one fatal weakness: greed, and I was going to exploit it. That evening, Julian returned, smelling of alcohol. He seemed to be in a bad mood, probably after another unsuccessful meeting. But when he saw the lavish dinner I had prepared, his expression softened. Dinner proceeded in a tense silence. Annie kept her head down, not daring to look up. I, on the other hand, actively served Julian food, smiling benevolently. "Julian," I began, my voice deliberately tinged with sadness, "I called home this afternoon. I just received some very unfortunate news." Julian looked up, surprised. "What is it, Mom?" "A great aunt of mine, the one I was closest to as a child, just passed away suddenly." I dabbed the corner of my eye with a napkin, a single tear falling right on cue. I never knew I had such talent for acting. The funeral is in 2 days. According to our old traditions, all the children and grandchildren must go back to pay their respects. Otherwise, it's considered deeply unfilial. I looked him straight in the eye, continuing my performance. "I'm getting old, and it's not convenient for me to travel back and forth alone. I was hoping Annie could accompany me. After all, she's part of the younger generation. It's only right that she goes back to honor her elders. Annie looked up too, her eyes red, playing her part perfectly. Yes, Julian, my great-aunt was always so kind to me. I want to go back. Julian frowned, clearly reluctant. But I'm swamped with work right now. And if Annie leaves, who will look after Leo? Leo will come with us, I said immediately, giving him no time to think. The boy hasn't been back home in a long time. I want to take him to see old friends, so he knows where his roots are. Besides, on the way back, we'll stop in Boston for a day, so Annie can see your parents. They must miss their grandson, too. We'll be back very quickly, as soon as the funeral services are over. Julian's face darkened. He was calculating. Letting all three of us go meant his hostages would be out of his control. He would never agree. No, he said flatly, just as I expected. Your work is demanding right now, and Leo has to get ready for school. As for the family matter, Mom, you can just wire some money back. Everyone will understand. Now was the time to throw out the decisive bait. I sighed, my face a mask of sorrow mixed with tolerance. I know you're both busy, but this is a matter of filial piety. It can't be ignored. How about this? I paused, looking directly into his eyes. Just let Annie and Leo go back with me. I promise, just 1 week, and we'll be right back. Think of it as a chance for Annie to get away and clear her head. You've seen how her spirits have been low lately. I lowered my voice, as if confiding in him. Julian, actually, the savings I brought with me this time. Aside from my retirement, I had another plan. I see your business is doing well, but I'm sure you could use more capital to expand. After I go back this time, I plan to withdraw a large sum, about $50,000, to give to you and Annie for the business. Consider it an investment from me in my grandson's future. $50,000? I saw it clearly. For a brief second, a glint of pure greed flashed in Julian's eyes. His pupils dilated. He tried to hide his excitement, but the slight upward twitch of his lips betrayed him. For a gambler drowning in debt, that number was a lifeline, an irresistible temptation. He was silent for a long time, pretending to weigh his options. He was balancing the risk of his hostages being out of sight against the enormous, immediate benefit. But his arrogance made him believe that Annie and I, two defenseless women, wouldn't dare do anything behind his back. Besides, the promise of our return in just 1 week gave him a false sense of security. It's just a week, he must have thought. Then everything will be back under his control, and he'll have both the money and the people. Since you've put it that way, Mom, he finally said, his voice noticeably softer. All right then. I'll book the tickets for you and Annie, but you have to promise me you'll come right back after everything is done. Of course, I smiled, a victor's smile. This is my home now, too. A heavy weight lifted from my heart. The fish had taken the bait. The next 2 days were spent in a state of extreme tension. It felt like walking a tightrope across a deep canyon, where a single gust of wind could send us plummeting. Annie and I had to feign grief, preparing mourning clothes while secretly packing our most important documents and essential belongings. Every action, every word had to be carefully measured because that beast was still roaming the house, watching us. The very night he agreed, after he had a few drinks and fell into a deep sleep, I slipped into his study and used his computer to secretly book 3 one-way tickets straight to New Orleans. I chose the earliest flight, at dawn in 2 days. I didn't dare use my own credit card. Instead, I used the emergency cash I had carefully hidden to pay online through a third-party service. I cleared every trace of the transaction. Those were the most nerve-wracking 20 minutes of my life. Every click of the mouse made my heart pound in my chest. Packing was a battle of wits. We had to make it look like we were only going for a short trip, a few black outfits, some of Leo's things. But underneath that top layer were all our identification papers, the envelope of evidence, and the remaining US dollars I had hidden away. We were packing our lives and our futures into 2 small suitcases. Annie secretly placed their only wedding photo into my suitcase, then immediately took it out, tore it into pieces, and threw it in the trash. She was breaking with her past. Julian was the picture of a thoughtful husband. He personally called a taxi for us to go to the airport and gave us all sorts of instructions. Mom, Annie, travel safely. Call me as soon as things are settled. I'll be waiting for your call at home." He hugged and kissed Leo, then turned and gave Annie a brief embrace. I saw my daughter's body go rigid. His smile to me was more terrifying than the claws of a demon. Sitting in the taxi, driving away from that neighborhood, Annie was still trembling. She kept looking back, as if she feared Julian would come chasing after us. I held her cold hand tightly, trying to transfer my own warmth and strength to her. "It's okay, child. It's almost over. Just breathe." I looked out the window as the sprawling suburbs of America faded behind us. For many, this was the promised land, but for the three of us, it had been a gilded cage. The check-in process at the airport went surprisingly smoothly. Every time I heard our names called, every time I handed our passports to an agent, my heart seized with fear. I was terrified a phone call would come, that a hand would land on our shoulders, and a voice would say, "Please, come back with us." But nothing happened. Finally, we were safely seated on the plane. The cabin door closed, sealing us off from the world outside. Annie was still tense, her hands gripping the armrests. Leo, exhausted, had already fallen asleep. I heard the roar of the engines as the plane slowly taxied to the runway. Then, with a powerful push, it accelerated and lifted into the sky. I could feel my body pressed against the back of the seat. Through the small window, I watched the lights of Los Angeles grow smaller and smaller, becoming blurry specks until they were just pinpricks of light, finally swallowed by the dark night. The moment the plane leveled off above the clouds, completely clear of American airspace, Annie turned to look at me. The wall of strength she had painstakingly built over the past few days crumbled. She began to cry, but it wasn't the terrified weeping of before. It was a cry of release, of pain and relief all at once. I pulled her into my arms, holding her and my grandson tightly. My own tears, which I had held back for so long, began to flow silently. We had done it. We had escaped from hell. Looking out the window at the soft white clouds drifting by, I knew we still had a long road ahead of us. We would face judgment, and we would have to start over from nothing. But none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was that we were free, and we still had each other. This fated retirement journey had ended after just 2 days, but it had taught me a painful lesson. Home isn't about a big house or a distant promised land. Home is wherever your loved ones can be safe and at peace. And on this flight, I was taking my little family back to our real home. The plane landed at Louis Armstrong New Orleans International Airport on a sweltering afternoon. As I helped Annie, holding a sleeping Leo, and stepped out of the arrivals hall, breathing in that familiar air, that thick humidity, the distant smell of Creole cooking and damp earth, I finally believed the nightmare was, for now, over. We were home. Annie started crying again, but these were tears of safety, the tears of a lost child who had finally found her way back to harbor. But I knew this was no time to rest. That beast was still on the other side of the ocean, and if we let our guard down for even a moment, his claws could reach us here. The escape was only the first step. Now, it was time to fight back. The first thing I did wasn't to go back to my sold condo or to notify my friends. Safety was paramount. I used a different name to book a suite at a luxurious but discreet hotel in the central business district. I needed a secure location with good security that he would never find. That very first night, after settling Annie and Leo in with dinner and putting them to bed, I sat alone in the living room and opened my laptop. The faint glow of the screen illuminated my determined face. I wasn't reading the news or checking emails. I was looking for a weapon. I spent hours researching top-rated private investigation firms in Los Angeles. I read hundreds of reviews, compared prices, and paid special attention to companies with experience in financial fraud and complex domestic cases. I couldn't afford a single mistake. Every dollar I spent had to buy justice for my daughter. Finally, I settled on a firm called Veritas Investigations. The Latin word for truth gave me a sense of confidence. Their website was professional, and their team was composed of former LAPD detectives and federal agents. I took a deep breath and dialed the international number. A man with a standard American accent answered. Using the English I had perfected during my teaching career, I stated my request calmly and clearly. "My name is Eleanor Vance. I am a Chinese citizen. I need to hire your services to investigate my son-in-law, Julian Thorne. He currently resides in Los Angeles. I suspect him of gambling, illegal debt, and domestic violence. More seriously, he is conspiring to murder me to fraudulently claim my assets and a life insurance policy. The man on the other end was silent for a moment, perhaps surprised by my directness and the gravity of the accusations. Mrs. Vance, those are very serious allegations. Do you have any preliminary evidence? Yes, I answered flatly. I have photos of my daughter's injuries, copies of his loan documents, and a copy of my life insurance policy that he stole. I will email them to you immediately. I gave them every piece of information I had: his address, his license plate number, the name of the shell company he was always bragging about, and all the personal habits Annie had told me about. I told them money was no object. I had only one request: find the truth and gather irrefutable evidence so I could bring that monster to justice. After hanging up, I immediately wired them a substantial retainer. Watching the numbers in my account decrease didn't pain me in the slightest. Money could be earned again, but the lives and peace of my children were priceless. My invisible net had been cast from New Orleans, stretching across the Pacific, silently closing in on its unsuspecting prey. The following days were a psychological battle. We stayed in the hotel, limiting our outings, trying to create the safest possible environment for Leo. The little one was happy. He loved the hotel pool and all the new foods. Seeing his smile gave me more motivation, but Annie was not okay. She lived in constant fear. Every time my phone rang, she would jump. And Julian didn't make us wait long. The first call came on the second day after our return. It was a video call. I answered and handed the phone to Annie, signaling for her to stay calm. "How are you and Mom? Did you arrive okay?" Julian's voice came through, still dripping with that false concern. We arrived," Annie stammered, forcing a smile. "Why do you look so tired? Where's Leo?" "He's sleeping. I'm just a little jet-lagged." "Well, get some rest. Let me know when you're done there so I can book your tickets back." With that, he hung up. A short call, but it was enough to leave Annie in a cold sweat. The second call came on the fourth day. His tone had already started to change. "What's going on? You're not done yet? What kind of funeral takes this long?" He was getting impatient. I took the phone. "Julian, you don't understand the customs here. There are many more rituals for the funeral. It will take about a week to get everything mostly settled." "A week?" "Mom, do you have any idea how chaotic my work is right now? You tell Annie to get her things together and come back soon." He was practically shouting. I replied calmly, "I understand, Julian. I'll tell her to hurry once things are done." I knew he was getting anxious. The $50,000 I had promised was tormenting him. A desperate gambler can't wait for long. By the 6th day, his impatience had turned into threats. He stopped making video calls and called Annie's cell phone directly. She was too scared to answer, so I put it on speaker. "Annie Vance, are you coming back or not?" His voice roared from the phone, all pretense gone. "Don't you dare try to pull any tricks on me. Do you think you can get away? I'm telling you, don't push me." Annie collapsed onto the floor, her hands over her ears, shaking all over. I immediately hung up the phone. His rage had been unleashed. It was terrifying, but it was also a good sign. It meant he was losing control, and people who lose control make mistakes. That was the longest night. Annie had nightmares, screaming over and over. I had to hold her in my arms, comforting her just as I did when she was a little girl. I couldn't sleep either. I worried about our safety, and I worried about the investigation in the U.S. What if the detectives found nothing? What if that monster actually flew here to find us? Then, on the 7th day, the day I had promised we would return, my phone rang with an unknown number from the United States. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was them. I quickly went out onto the balcony and closed the door so Annie wouldn't hear. "Hello, is this Mrs. Vance?" It was the same man's voice from before, but this time there was an unmistakable excitement in it. "This is she. Do you have any news?" I asked, my voice hoarse with tension. "Ma'am, we don't just have news. We have everything you need," he said. "Your target was very careless. We tailed him. He wasn't going to any company. He was spending every day at an underground casino in Koreatown and losing a lot of money. We have photos, we have recordings, the evidence of his gambling and debt is crystal clear. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. And his conspiracy? The detective paused, as if for dramatic effect. This is the most important part. Ma'am? We placed a micro-listening device in his car. And just yesterday, he made a call to a known associate, a professional debt collector. He had no idea he was walking right into our trap. We recorded the entire conversation. My ears were ringing. The conversation? What was in the conversation? He was discussing how to stage a car accident. The detective's voice turned grave. Ma'am, he wanted the man to tamper with the brake system of the car that you and your daughter frequently use. The plan was that when you and your daughter returned, he would drive that car, take you onto a secluded highway, and cause a fatal crash. I felt the blood freeze in my veins. We have a very clear recording, the detective continued, his voice as cold as steel. Julian said, "Can you handle the brakes? It has to look like a real accident. The old woman and my wife, both of them have to go." The associate asked about the child. Julian replied, "He won't be in the car. I need him so I can play the grieving father and collect the insurance money. Ma'am, we have everything. There is no way he can deny it now." I sagged against the balcony railing to keep from collapsing. The world was spinning. The truth was far more brutal than I had ever imagined. He didn't just want to kill me. He wanted to kill Annie, the woman who shared his bed. "Mrs. Vance, are you there?" I'm here," I whispered, trying to regain my composure. Tears of rage welled up, but I quickly wiped them away. This was not the time for weakness. All the evidence, including the audio files, videos, photos, and financial documents, has been compiled into a complete file. We will send it to your lawyer and forward a copy to the Los Angeles Police Department. The legal net is ready. As soon as you give the word, we will close it. I took a deep breath, looking at the darkening New Orleans sky. Thank you. Do it. Tighten the net. After hanging up, I stood on the balcony for a long time. A night breeze blew past, carrying a chill. But it couldn't extinguish the fire of justice burning in my heart. The game is over, Julian. You lose. Holding the file sent by the detective agency, I felt a cold power spread through me. This was no longer a vague warning or a secret message. This was hard evidence, the sword of justice I was about to unsheathe. I was no longer afraid. All I had left was rage and an iron will to get justice for my daughter and grandson. I looked at Annie, who was still trembling from the threatening phone calls. "Annie," I said, my voice unnervingly calm, "it's time to end this. We're going to Boston." "Boston?" Annie asked blankly. "What for, Mom?" "To pull back the curtain on a play," I replied, my eyes sharp. "A play that your wonderful husband, your in-law's precious son, has been performing for far too long." Before we left, I did one more thing. I used a new burner phone to call Julian. He answered almost immediately, his tone impatient. "Yeah, who is this?" "It's me, Eleanor Vance." There was silence on the other end. He clearly never expected me to call him directly, especially not with this tone. "Your game is over, Julian," I said. Each word squeezed out from between my teeth, cold as ice. I no longer called him by any familiar term or referred to myself as Mom. "The things you did, the words you said in that car, I know everything. You just wait there. I'm coming for you." I hung up before he could say a word. I could imagine the look of panic on his face. I had to act before he could come up with a counterplan. The next day, Annie, Leo, and I took the earliest flight to Boston. Standing at the door of the Thorns' luxurious home, a place I had previously visited as a respected in-law, I felt a wave of mixed emotions, but I quickly pushed aside all feelings of weakness. I wasn't here today as family. I was here to demand justice. Julian's parents, Mr. Arthur Thorne and Mrs. Beatrice Thorne, came to greet us, their faces surprised but still polite. "Eleanor, dear, you and the children, why didn't you tell us you were coming?" Beatrice said warmly, reaching out to hug Leo. I took a step back. That small gesture was enough to make the atmosphere tense. I'm not here for a social visit today. I have urgent business to discuss. Business that concerns our lives and your family's reputation." The gravity in my voice stunned them. They ushered us inside, their faces filled with confusion. Once we were all seated in the opulent living room, I dispensed with any pleasantries and placed the thick envelope of evidence directly on the mahogany coffee table. "Please, take a look," I said. "This is the true face of your precious son, your pride and joy." Arthur Thorne frowned and cautiously opened the envelope. The first thing he pulled out was the photo of Annie's bruised face. His expression changed instantly. Beatrice, beside him, leaned over to look, then let out a small scream, covering her mouth with her hand. What is this?" "Annie, did Julian?" she stammered, unable to finish the sentence. Annie just bowed her head, tears streaming down her face. Her silence was more damning than 1,000 words. I continued, pushing out the loan shark contracts and the copy of the insurance policy. Finally, I took out a small audio recorder. "This might not be enough. Please, listen to a recent conversation your son had. It was recorded just 2 days ago." I pressed play. Julian's familiar voice filled the silent room, clear and venomous. "Can you handle the breaks? It has to look like a real accident. The old woman and my wife, both of them have to go." Arthur's face went from red to ashen. Beatrice swayed, nearly falling off the sofa. In all their lives, they had never imagined that the son they had always doted on and protected could say something so barbaric. "No, that's impossible," Arthur said, shaking his head, his voice trembling. "My Julian, he's a good boy. He wouldn't hurt a fly." "Yes, he was always so obedient," a clear but sorrowful voice said from the top of the stairs. We all looked up. A young, slender woman with a pale face was standing there, tears streaming down her cheeks. As she walked down, her eyes met mine, and I froze. That face, those eyes filled with both fear and kindness. It was her. It was the woman who had slipped the note into my pocket at the Los Angeles airport. "Clara?" Beatrice said in astonishment. "What are you doing here?" The woman, Clara Julian's sister, didn't answer her mother. She walked straight to me, and then, suddenly, bowed deeply. "I'm so sorry, Auntie. I'm so sorry. I should have been braver. I should have told you everything sooner." "It was you?" I asked, my voice still laced with shock. Clara nodded, tears in her eyes. "Yes. I know what my brother is like. I've lived in his shadow my whole life. Whenever I went against his wishes, he would find ways to torment me. Not with fists, but with words, with humiliation. He locked me in closets, tore up my homework, threatened my friends. But every time I told Mom and Dad, they didn't believe me." She turned to her parents, her eyes full of reproach. "They always said he was the obedient one, and I was just the troublemaker, jealous of my brother. Did you know? I had to go through years of therapy because of the trauma he caused." Arthur and Beatrice were stunned into silence. "Last month, I secretly flew to the U.S. to see Annie and Leo because I knew his temper, and I was worried about her," Clara continued, her voice shaking. "Then I overheard him on the phone with someone. He mentioned an insurance policy. He mentioned a car crash. I was terrified. I knew Mom and Dad wouldn't believe me if I told them, so I could only try to warn you in that stupid, cowardly way. I'm so sorry." The young woman collapsed to the floor, sobbing. With that, the whole truth was out. The carefully constructed facade of virtue that Julian and his family had maintained for years was finally shattered. Their precious son wasn't a kind, obedient boy. He was a monster in human skin, a bully who had been getting away with his cruelty since childhood. The shock in the Thorne household lingered for a long time. Finally, the ever-stoic Arthur Thorne picked up the phone, his hand trembling. His voice was hoarse. He said only one sentence. "You get yourself back here right now. Get back to Boston immediately." We didn't have to wait long. Perhaps sensing the gravity of the situation, Julian took the next flight back. When he walked through the door, his face still held a hint of defiance. But when he saw me, Annie, and especially his sister Clara, all standing together, when he saw the pile of evidence spread across the table, and most of all, when he met the furious and utterly disappointed eyes of his parents, his arrogance shattered. He fell to his knees, stammering denials. "No, it's not like that. Just let me explain." "Explain?" I stood up and walked toward him, my voice cold and hard. "What is there left to explain? The bruises on my daughter's body? The plan to stage a car crash? Or perhaps you'd like to hear your own voice again?" I held up the audio recorder. Julian looked at it like it was a venomous snake, his face drained of all color. He was broken. He couldn't say a word. I turned to Arthur and Beatrice. "I have shown you the true face of your son. Now, I will tell you my decision. I am going to submit all of this evidence to the courts in both the United States and China. I will sue him for conspiracy to commit murder, domestic violence, and fraud. He will pay for everything he has done." When I finished, the room fell into silence. Annie held my hand tightly, giving me strength. Clara looked at her brother with a mixture of hatred and pity. Then, Julian's parents did something I could never have imagined. They walked over to me and slowly, painfully, knelt on the floor. "Eleanor, we're begging you," Beatrice cried, pressing her forehead against the cold floor. "It's our fault. We failed to raise him right. We beg you, please, give him a chance to live." Arthur Thorne, a man who had never bowed his head to anyone in his life, was now weeping, his voice choked with anguish. "Eleanor, we know our son is a monster. He deserves whatever he gets. But please think of our grandson. Think of Leo. He's so young. What will become of his future when people point at him and say his father is a murderer? He'll live his whole life in shame and guilt. That's too cruel a sentence for an innocent child." They knelt before me, crying and pleading. They would agree to any condition: an immediate divorce, giving Annie full custody of the child, compensating for all material and psychological damages, even transferring all of Julian's assets to Leo. They asked for only one thing: do not take him to court. Do not ruin his life with a prison sentence. I stood there, frozen. The fire of my righteous anger felt as if it had been doused with a bucket of ice water. I wanted justice. I wanted the wicked to be punished. But looking at the two elderly people at my feet, looking at my young grandson in Annie's arms, who was staring at everyone with a confused expression, my heart was in turmoil. Their pleas had struck my only weakness: my love as a mother, and my even greater love for my grandson. Should I seek justice for my daughter, or secure a future for my grandson that wasn't overshadowed by the past? Should I let a monster receive his just deserts, or choose forgiveness to give a child a chance at a less thorny path in life? I looked at Annie. She was crying too, her eyes filled with conflict. Ultimately, this decision wasn't just mine to make. It was hers too, the person who had endured all the pain. The heart of a mother and a grandmother was facing its most cruel choice. The opulent living room of the Thorne residence was submerged in a silence so thick it was suffocating. The pleading cries of Arthur and Beatrice had ceased, replaced by choked, desperate sobs. They remained kneeling, two gray-haired people who had lived their lives in a world of prestige and respect, now prostrated at my feet, begging for their monstrous son. Julian was slumped on the floor, his large frame now shrunken, pathetic like a defeated dog. I stood motionless, feeling as if I were balanced on a razor's edge between two chasms. On one side was the chasm of justice, where the fire in my heart roared for retribution. The images of Annie's injuries, the venom in his recorded voice, it all flashed before my eyes. I wanted to see him in handcuffs, locked away in a prison cell, facing the full force of the law. He deserved it. Justice had to be served. But on the other side was an equally deep and painful chasm, the chasm of family. Arthur Thorne's words were like a knife in my heart. What will become of his future when people point at him and say his father is a murderer? My gaze instinctively fell on Leo. He was no longer in his mother's arms. He was playing in a corner of the room with a small robot his grandparents had just given him. He was completely oblivious to the storm raging around him. His eyes were so clear, his smile so innocent. In his world, his daddy was still a hero, and his grandparents were people who loved him dearly. How could I bear to destroy that world? How could I carve a wound into his young soul that would never heal, a sense of shame that would follow him for the rest of his life? I looked at Annie. She was looking at me, her eyes a mirror of my own struggle. I knew she hated Julian with every fiber of her being, but when she heard his parents speak of Leo's future, her mother's heart broke too. She said nothing, but I knew she was leaving the decision to me. Time seemed to stand still. I took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to calm my racing heart. And then, I made a choice. It was not forgiveness. Forgiveness was impossible. It was a sentence passed down by a family member, a pragmatic and painful choice made to protect the ones I loved. Mr. Thorne, Mrs. Thorne, please get up. My voice rang out, no longer cold as ice, but devoid of any warmth. It was the voice of someone utterly exhausted, who just wanted it all to be over. They looked up, their eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. I didn't look at them. I looked at the pathetic man on the floor. I will not press criminal charges. A flicker of relief shone in his eyes and in his parents', but I immediately followed up, extinguishing it without mercy. But don't get too excited. I'm not doing this for you, or for your parents. I am doing this for my grandson, for Leo. I don't want him to carry the weight of your sins for his entire life. I am sparing you from prison, but I will never, ever forgive what you have done. In my eyes, you are already dead, and from this day forward, you are no longer Leo's father. I turned to Arthur and Beatrice, and my concession comes with several non-negotiable conditions. If you do not accept them, then tomorrow, my lawyer will be in contact with the police. We accept everything, Beatrice said hastily. Then listen carefully, I said, my voice clear and decisive, like I was reading a verdict. First, divorce. Julian and Annie will file for an immediate and unconditional divorce. I do not want my daughter to have any connection to a monster like your son. Second, custody. Annie will have full and sole legal and physical custody of Leo. Your family, especially Julian, is forbidden from contacting or approaching the child without Annie's written permission. You have forfeited the right to be his grandparents, and he has forfeited the right to be his father. Third, responsibility and child support. Although you will no longer have a relationship, you are still responsible for your own flesh and blood. Every month, your family will pay $2,000 in child support directly transferred to Annie's account until Leo turns 18. This is not money for them. It is to ensure that my grandson has the prosperous future that his father tried to destroy. And finally, and most importantly, I stressed, all of the above terms must be drawn up into a legally binding document. I will hire the best lawyer in Boston. All papers must be signed in the presence of both parties' lawyers and notarized within the next 3 days. I do not trust verbal promises. I only trust black and white, stamped with the seal of the law. I finished my pronouncement. 4 conditions, like 4 impenetrable walls, that I had erected to forever protect my daughter and grandson from this family's harm. Arthur Thorne nodded without a moment's hesitation. We accept. We accept unconditionally. Thank you. Thank you for your magnanimity. His gratitude sounded like a cruel joke. This wasn't magnanimity. It was a trade. I had traded my justice for my grandson's peace. The next few days in Boston were a whirlwind. Lawyers were hired. Documents were drafted. Annie and I saw Julian one last time, at the law office. He didn't dare look at us. He just kept his head down and signed everything. The divorce petition, the asset agreement, the child support agreement. There was no trace of the successful, polished man he once pretended to be. All that was left was a hollow, defeated shell. The day we left Boston, no one from the Thorne family came to see us off. The bonds of family, of marriage, everything had been severed, coldly and completely. The flight back to New Orleans felt entirely different. There was no fear of escape, no joy of reunion. There was only the quiet, settled stillness of a soul that has weathered a great storm. Back in New Orleans, I didn't check into a hotel. I used my remaining savings and a portion of the settlement from the Thornes to buy a new condo in a quiet, green neighborhood. It wasn't as big as my old place, but it was cozy, and most importantly, it was ours, a place with no painful memories. The 3 of us, me, Annie, and Leo, started our new life. It was difficult at first. Annie still had nightmares and was afraid to interact with strangers. But time, combined with love and patience, gradually healed her wounds. I picked up my old hobbies again: gardening, reading, practicing calligraphy. But my greatest joy now was making breakfast for my family every morning and picking Leo up from school every afternoon. Annie, with my encouragement, used her language skills to start an online English tutoring class for children. The work not only brought in an income, but also helped her rediscover her confidence and her joy for life. Leo grew up healthy and happy. He was very attached to his grandma and mom. Occasionally, he would ask about his father. When he did, Annie would just gently tell him, "Daddy had to go work in a place very, very far away, but Daddy will always love you. And here you have Mommy and Grandma. We are a family." One autumn evening, the three of us were sitting on the balcony, watching the moon together. A gentle breeze carried the faint scent of sweet olive. Leo was sitting in my lap, chattering about his day at school. Annie sat beside me, resting her head gently on my shoulder. Her smile had regained its sweetness and serenity. I looked at my daughter and grandson, then looked up at the full, bright moon in the sky. My life had been through the most violent of storms. The wounds in my heart may never fully heal. They will remain as scars, reminders of those dark times. But now, the storm has passed. The sun is out. We didn't get the wealthy life in America. We are just living an ordinary life in New Orleans. But we found something more precious than any luxury or material wealth. We found peace, freedom, and a love that can never be shaken. We are together, under a truly safe roof. And for me, that is everything. Thank you for watching. I hope today's story resonated with you. For those who haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click that subscribe button so we can accompany you every day. Let's grow together. We'll see you in the next one.